So Fiona, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor having you on the show to talk about this wonderful new production. And I was wondering if you could start off by telling me a little bit about what your first thoughts were when you first read this amazing production's script. And I guess starting with you, Fiona.
Well, look, Laura actually was the first who read it. I'll let you explain her side of it, but she suggested it to me, and we sat down in a cafe and both read it together. And it really struck me just the relevance now, even though it was written in 2015, the focus on human touch and the fact that we'd been in isolation for 2 years and the relevance of that to, the fact that we were kept away from other people, and especially I know, like a lot of other people, I lived alone, and I lived out in the Dandenong Ranges during lockdown, so I really felt that isolation really strongly, and it really hit home just when the whole story came together. So yeah.
And Laura, what were your first thoughts as well?
Yeah, it was really funny actually. So I was isolating in January when I read it because I had COVID. And yeah, I just bawled like a baby when I first read it because it was just, it really hits home. And even though it's got nothing to do with COVID, written, before that, yeah, like Fiona said, it's all about the importance of human touch and human connection and when it's given and when it's withheld. And I think we've all become so aware since isolation of, intimacy and yeah, physical connections. So it's just a beautiful play, and it's really, really relevant, and definitely, yeah, explores touch in all its forms and through multiple stories. And yeah, it just the moment I read it, I think I called Fiona up. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and I was like, "You have to read this." I think we found it, and we'd been looking for plays for a long time, and yeah, she read it and loved it, and then we read it together, and at the end we just sort of sat there looking at each other, and we were like, yeah, this is the one.
Laura, I talked in the other interview about the fact that I think COVID's changed everybody's thoughts now around what it's like to lose something around you. Like I said during it that my wife and I had COVID at different times, so there was 3 separate times when we were living in the same house but couldn't touch each other because one of us had COVID. But also, for a lot of people, it was the first time they ever lost a sense. I know people that lost their sense of smell, lost their sense of taste when they had COVID. Do you think people will approach the production now with a different sense of mind because they know what it's like now to lose something like that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's already an incredibly captivating story, but I just feel like everything that we've experienced over the past couple of years, it just hits home in a different way. I think we have a better understanding of it because we've all experienced some kind of sensory deprivation in multiple different forms over the last couple of years. So I think everyone's going to come into it and be able to relate to all of the different stories in some way.
Definitely. Now, we know that this is a production that has all intertwining stories, so I was wondering if, Fiona, could you tell us a little bit about your character in this production?
Yeah, so I'm playing 2 characters. Well, kind of 3, but one of them is just a very small part. So both of my characters, it's quite interesting the way that it's written, and this is kind of my interpretation. I think is quite frequently I will say to people when I read plays, oh, I don't want to play the mother, I don't want to play the wife, because that's often the roles that come up for women. And it was really interesting when you read the character descriptions of this play, because Libby, who's one of my characters, is described as Mark's wife, and Alice is described as Peter's mother. So obviously I did the wee eye roll when I first read it, but I believe this is my interpretation, but I believe that was done deliberately, because Susie Miller's taken very specific archetypes, like the wife, the mother, the doctor, all of these different things, the refugee, all of these different archetypes, and given them a real story rather than just the supporting character.
Yep.
So I think that was a really strong thing for me. Libby is, she's the wife of, the one character who's the thread through all the stories is Mark, who's a surgeon, and she's the wife of Mark. And essentially, her story in this is about when you get to the stage with somebody that you are really, really close with and you know really well. I think my interpretation of it was it's like us against the world with me and Mark. But you get to, when that's taken away from you and you're no longer a unit, you're no longer kind of both of you together acting as one, and it becomes separate. That's her story of how she relates to that and how she fights for to get back how things were. So yeah, that's kind of Libby. And then Alice is, I don't want to give away too much about Alice because it's,
that's okay.
It's one of the key stories towards the end, but she's the mother, basically her situation is she has, she's in the situation of not being allowed to touch her son, who's in prison in Singapore, and she's not allowed to have physical contact with him, and the cruelty of that, and the actual impact that has on her. The fact that something so basic as touch, when it's denied, it means so much more than anything else that you could be deprived of. So yeah,
definitely.
So both very strong characters and great. I think every single character is great to play in this play. It's a really strong story, and it doesn't. She doesn't hold anything back. So there's a lot of discussion around, or there's a lot of conversation around, really important things. So yeah.
Definitely. And Laura, tell us a little bit about your character as well.
Yeah, so I'm also playing two characters. The first is Saskia, who is married to Cameron, and without giving too much away, they're a young married couple, and infidelity comes into the story, and through that, exploring, what happens when trust is broken, and a third person sort of enters the relationship, and I suppose exploring that, and then how do you move forward, and so that's the first character. And then the second, I play Kate, who is a young single mother, and works as a phone sex operator.
Okay,
which is a lot of fun, and that's really interesting, exploring intimacy without touch through a phone line. So, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's an interesting role for your debut. This is your debut performance. Have you found that a bit of a challenge approaching, have you gone out and spoken to people that have done that for a job, or?
I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I've been doing a lot of research on it, and I just find it fascinating. And honestly, this play, it's a heavy play. There's a lot of heavy content, and a lot of it just is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking, and this is the fun part of it. It just brings so much joy, and it's light, and it's I just find a lot of freedom in it, and it's a chance to kind of bring a bit of light into a bit of a dark production, I suppose. There's just some comedic relief. I just find a lot of joy in doing it. It's really fascinating. It's a whole world that I was always really interested in, but I just never really knew much about. And so learning about it and listening to phone calls, real phone calls that have happened, and it's quite shocking, but it's definitely a character that I never thought that I would be playing, but I just love it. It's really fun.
Now, I guess this is a question for both of you, but we'll start with Fiona. As Laura just said, this is a kind of dark and heavy production. What are you hoping that audiences will take away from this production?
I think there's a lot of themes that will kind of kick people in the gut, so it will make people think. But I think there's a real what's the word? There's a real mix. Like the number of stories that are happening throughout will keep people compelled, and each of the stories in their own right is compelling. But the way that they interweave, it just kind of builds the story and builds the story and builds the story. But I do believe that although there are really, I suppose, heavy and dark topics, there is hope at the end of it. And often I find exploring topics that might be viewed as heavy, actually, it makes us understand them a bit better, and it brings that hope towards the end. But there are some really beautiful moments of comic relief in it as well. What the role Laura was talking about, and some of the other roles, it's just or just kind of wee snippets in scenes that are really contrasting with what's going on in the scene. So yeah, I think it's very much, I don't know, there's so much in the play. I think it's going to go really fast if you're the audience, because it's going to be hit by something and then hit by something, but it's all compelling, so it's not going to be confusing, and the story's really, yeah. That's a terrible description of it. Yeah.
And Laura, that's what
I think I'd get out of it.
Yeah. And sorry. Laura, what do you hope that audiences take away from this production?
Yeah, I think we tell a really diverse range of stories, so I hope just understanding and leaving with an open heart, and hug your loved ones, hold them close, and just, yeah, don't underestimate the importance of connection, and look for it in everything that you do, I think. Yeah.
Definitely.
I hope you believe and they hug whoever they've come with.
Definitely. Now, to finish off, I wanted to ask you both, and we'll start with Laura, what's it been like to work with Kate too as a director?
Oh, she's fabulous. She's wonderful. She's just brought such a sense of play to all of the scenes, and she's given us so much freedom to really allow us to navigate our way through it and find our way into the character. And it's been such a beautiful process, I think. We've really gotten to know all of our characters just as time goes on, and she's allowed us to kind of meet them and get to know them and slowly become them and step into them and try out different circumstances and different scenarios. And we do a lot of improvisation, which I haven't done too much of before, and it's just been amazing with getting to know the characters, and particularly with, you know, your scene partners. You really build a lot of history, and every production of this show will be completely different because the actors will have created different histories, and that's a really nice feeling to know that we're creating incredibly unique characters. And we've been able to do that by doing a lot of improvisation and crafting them together, and it's just been a really beautiful journey.
And Fiona, how have you found working with Kate?
Well, I second everything that Laura says. I feel really lucky that we have got Kate on board as our director. I think for me, the biggest thing is just the openness, in terms of, I mean, all of that playing and discovering your character certainly is the foundation of what she does with us, but also it's that kind of, I think actors can often get bogged down in the detail of am I doing justice to this character? Am I getting it right? And sometimes that will take away from actually just being really truthful about the character, and she's got a real attitude of, okay, if that doesn't work, let's just try something else. And I think that's amazing, because it is kind of like you develop and you build layers and layers every time we rehearse, but it's not like, okay, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It's very open and, like Laura said, very playful. So yeah, and the improvisation has been amazing too. So yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we hope that a lot of our listeners will actually head along and check out CARESS 8. We've put all the ticketing details up on our website as well, so people will be able to check that out. But for now, I want to say, Fiona, Laura, congratulations on what I'm sure is going to be a great production, but also good luck as well.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.